Let me ask you something uncomfortable. When you hear Britain and slavery in the same sentence, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For most people, it's abolition. It's William Wilberforce. It's moral leadership and doing the right thing. That's the story we all know, the one we're taught. But what if that story only begins at the ending? What if Britain's role in the Atlantic slave trade didn't just vanish with abolition, but instead, it changed shape, changed its language, and quietly continued to shape the modern world we live in today? Before we go any further, do me a favor and tell me where you're re-watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And as you listen to this one, ask yourself this question: how much of what you were taught about slavery focuses on guilt being resolved rather than on power being preserved? And if you value honest history, not just comfortable history, subscribe now. If you don't, you'll miss the parts of the story that most textbooks never explain. Britain likes its history neat. There's a clear villain, a clear hero, and a clear, moral ending. The story usually goes something like this. Slavery was a terrible thing. Britain realized it was wrong. Britain used its power to end it. And that version of events feels good, doesn't it? It allows a sense of national pride without having to deal with the messy responsibility. It offers closure without consequence. But history just doesn't work like that. To understand Britain's real role, we have to rewind the clock much, much further back. The Atlantic slave trade wasn't an accident. It was a meticulously planned business enterprise. It was financed by the wealthiest people in the country. It was insured by the earliest insurance markets. It was protected by law and by the Royal Navy. British ports like Liverpool, Bristol, and London didn't just participate in this trade. They thrived on it. They were built by it. The system was brutally efficient. Ships would leave Britain loaded with manufactured goods, textiles, guns, alcohol. Those goods were sailed to West Africa and traded for human beings. Those human beings were then shipped across the Atlantic in the horrific Middle Passage. And the products of their forced labor, sugar, cotton, tobacco, flowed back into Britain, creating unimaginable wealth. This was not a side business. For centuries, this was the very engine of the British economy. So, ask yourself this. If slavery was so clearly and obviously immoral, why did it take centuries for it to end? The answer is simple and deeply uncomfortable. The money, the wealth generated by enslaved people didn't stay in the colonies. It poured back into Britain. It built British banks. It funded universities that still stand today. It expanded the ports and railways that connected the country. It shaped entire cities. Even now, you can walk through London or Liverpool and see grand buildings and institutions that owe their existence to money earned from human suffering. And here's the part of the story that is almost never discussed in school. When slavery was finally abolished, the enslaved people were not compensated. Not a single penny was given to them for generations of stolen labor, stolen freedom, and stolen lives. But you know who was compensated? The slave owners. The British government took out an enormous loan and paid the equivalent of billions of pounds in today's money to the former slaveholders for their loss of property. That debt was so large it took generations of British taxpayers, including the descendants of the enslaved who had migrated to Britain, until 2015 to finally pay it off. Just think about that for a second. The enslaved were freed with nothing, forced to start from scratch in a world built against them. The enslavers were rewarded with a massive government bailout. If abolition was a moral victory, who actually paid the price for it? This is where the story gets even more uncomfortable, because abolition didn't end the system, it just changed its name. It ended the legal ownership of human beings, but it did not end forced labor. It did not end the extraction of resources. It did not end colonial control. Britain simply shifted its tactics. A system of indentured labor, particularly from South Asia, quickly replaced slavery on many plantations. Colonial economies across the Caribbean and Africa were deliberately restructured to keep wealth flowing outwards, back to the imperial center. Societies were left economically dependent, trapped in a cycle of producing raw materials for the industries of their former masters. The physical chains disappeared, but the economic systems of control remained. And the effects of that are still shockingly visible today. Ask yourself this. Why do so many former colonies, nations rich in natural resources and human potential, still struggle economically while the former imperial powers remain wealthy? The answer isn't a coincidence. It's a direct legacy of this history. Britain often presents itself as the nation that led the global fight against slavery. And it is true that the Royal Navy did play a role in intercepting slave ships after 1807. But leading the abolition movement does not erase the fact that Britain was also a leader in exploitation for centuries. Ending a crime does not undo the hundreds of years of profit you made from it. Yet, the abolition story is so often used as a shield. It's a convenient way to say, we fixed it. It's in the past. Let's move on. But history doesn't just move on because we stop talking about it. The wealth that was accumulated stayed. The global inequalities that were created stayed. Only the narratives changed to make us feel better. This isn't about assigning blame for things that happened in the past. It's about being honest in the present. You cannot understand modern Britain. You cannot understand the global economy. You cannot understand racial inequality today without understanding how deeply and fundamentally slavery shaped them all. Ignoring that truth doesn't make it disappear. It just makes it harder to fix the problems that followed. Let me ask you something personal. When you were taught this history in school, what parts were left out? And who do you think benefited from that silence? This is usually the moment in the video where many viewers click away. Because facing discomfort is hard. It feels easier to escape it than to confront it. But if you're still listening, it means you care more about the truth than you do about comfort. And if you're still not subscribed, ask yourself why. This channel exists to tell the stories that get softened, shortened, or skipped entirely. Missing them means you're only ever getting half of the picture. The Atlantic slave trade did not end in 1807 with the Abolition Act. Its consequences didn't end in 1833 with emancipation. They live on. They live on in the wealth gaps between nations and between communities. They live on in migration patterns. They live on in global power structures that still favor the West. Understanding that truth doesn't weaken a nation. It strengthens it. Because mature, confident societies are the ones that can face their own past honestly, warts and all. So here's my final question to you. Should Britain's story of abolition always be told alongside its story of profiting from slavery? Can a nation be both a liberator and a primary beneficiary of oppression at the same time? And what does justice even look like generations later? Write your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And if you want more history without the comfort filters, subscribe and share this video with someone who still thinks the story ended neatly. Because it didn't. And it still matters today. Thanks for watching.